My name's Rachel. I have 4 children now, but my story started 21 years ago nearly. First baby born, everything was absolutely fine, normal, bouncing baby girl called Hannah. Delightful. Another year or so later I found I was pregnant again, expected the similar story, but my story changed with child number 2. Nicola was late to be born. I was taken to hospital to be induced, as what happened, so a little bit more nervous about it all, and then it all went a bit horribly wrong. I was taken to the labour ward to deliver her, and she was born very, very quickly, whisked away, and there was no breathing and basically resuscitated from birth. It was quite scary, but as any of you will know who've had children, it's one of those things where it's not in your hands, and the nurses and doctors rallied round and did what they did, and it was all a little bit of a panic. But she was born, and my only prayer then was, let me keep my baby. All I wanted was to keep my baby. I wasn't really sure of how things were going to pan out. I wasn't really sure what was going on or what the difficulties were, but I knew she was poorly. She was whisked away to special care, and I spent the night wondering what was going on, really. Following morning, a little bit scared to go and see her, in case she hadn't made it through the night. I vividly remember a consultant coming in and shining a torch into my face during the night to say she may or may not make the next 24 hours. Scary moments, still the same prayer, Lord, let me keep my baby, that's all I want. My husband arrived and we went and saw her. All the other babies around were tiny because they were all prem. Nicola was over her birth date and needing a lot of help to keep her safe and keep her relatively well. 6 weeks we were in, and for 6 weeks I just clung to the thought that every day she's getting stronger, every day she'll be better. We had scans done, and there were obviously difficulties being picked up, but really all of that is a bit of a blur now. We got to take her home after 6 weeks, and life was challenging, to put it mildly, when she was little. Feeding was very difficult. She cried every waking moment. We still had our 18-month-old as it was to occupy and make life as normal as possible, but things were not right, and having had one before, kind of knew that. The early days were tricky. We didn't sleep very much. We were concerned but didn't really know what our concerns were. We were having weekly visits to a child development centre where we saw a physio, and we saw speech and language therapists and doctors and goodness knows what. But nobody told us anything until she was about 18 months old. Then she started to have fits quite significantly. And every time was a drop everything, find someone to look after Hannah, rush to hospital, and we were in at least overnight, if not for 2 or 3 nights. And that was life, and that was normal. But it was hard going, not knowing what the end result was going to be. At about maybe 2 years old, she'd made her lips very sore from her abnormal movements. She had met no milestones. She was not sitting, she was not crawling, she was not walking, she was not speaking, and she was barely feeding. Her weight was quite poor, but she was alive, she was breathing. We were just grateful for every day that we had with her. But at about 2 years old, she was taken to hospital, and because she'd made her lips really sore by kind of chewing in a funny way, and they tried every cream, every potion to try and stop that so that her feeding would improve. They decided they had to extract 4 teeth to improve her feeding, and at that point they said she has cerebral palsy. That was kind of great and kind of a nightmare. Good because we knew that we weren't going a little bit mad. There was significant delays, which we weren't sure, what was going on. But bad because that meant that was a disability for life, and it still told us nothing of what the end result was going to be. So we carried on, fits carried on until she was about 4.5. Her feeding started to improve because we were allowed to put a nasogastric tube down, which meant she got enough calories into her. And then we went to solids, and we just persevered. My aim in life was always make things as normal as possible. So I just kept going. Milestones, as they are in all the books and all the pages, were never met. Nicola still cannot sit, cannot walk, cannot stand, cannot weight bear, cannot do anything to help herself. She can't hold anything, she can't speak, she can't eat for herself. But she's a delightful young lady now who is happy with her lot. And I would genuinely say that. She doesn't know any different, she doesn't show any frustration, but she enjoys life and enjoys being around people. Yeah, and so she's now 19 and life has been challenging but good, and I am delighted that I have her, and she's changed my whole perspective of disability and what life's all about, really. So I've got 4 children. I've got Hannah, who's nearly 21, Nikki, my disabled daughter, who's 19 now, Jacob, who's 16, and Luke, who's 10. The 3 of them have obviously grown up with Nicola. You know, Hannah obviously had the sole run of the house to start with, and then Nikki came along, and the boys came after, learning to grow up with their disabled sister. Of course, they don't know any different because that's all they've ever known, and that is their normal. But they've each been shaped and changed by having Nikki in their lives, and you can see that by their personality and their compassion for others. If I start with Luke, he was obviously born quite late after Nikki. There's a 10-year gap between them, and he's the one who asks lots of questions about why is it she doesn't walk, and how come, you know, things are different for her. But he's accepted the explanations we've given him. Basically, we don't know. It's one of those things. But he has said recently that when he grows up, he wants to be a carer because he sees how lovely the carers are with her and the difference that they make to her life. Jacob also has got a bit of a sensitive side to him. When he was a baby, I was worried about, you know, him crawling over Nicola and pulling her hair, because she quite liked being on a mat, you know, in front of the telly and having a stretch out. But for some intrinsic reason, he didn't do any of those things. He'd walk or crawl carefully around her, he'd stroke her, he'd cuddle in, and just knew not to be a boy in front of her, but actually to be very sensitive to her. Anytime now, any, you know, young person comes into the youth club who is a little bit set apart, is something not quite the same as everybody else, maybe shy or with some kind of learning difficulty, he is the lad who'll go and make sure they're okay. So I know that, you know, Nicola's had an impact on him. And my eldest is just finishing a teaching degree, and quite often will ring me up and complain about the way some of the special needs children are marginalised, or that perhaps some mainstream teachers aren't quite sure what to do with them to help them in their education, and I think that's shaping her career and her profession, because her heart really is for those who are on the sidelines, those who need more help, not less, those who need, you know, a bit more care. She's there for them. So all 3 have been greatly affected for the better for having Nikki as their sister. I'm married to Steve. He's a Baptist minister with youth and children's work as his passion. He grew up in quite a difficult family life in Scotland. He was an only child with fostered children. There was, you know, a lot of comings and goings within his own life. But I think being married to me may have been the biggest challenge yet, and it was a new era really when we had Nicola. He doted on Hannah, everything was absolutely fine. Nicola came along and he was out of his depth, big time. He actually thought he'd lost me and her in delivery. I was absolutely fine, there was nothing wrong with me, but the perspective changed. Certainly with her, she didn't take to him very well, or he was nervous of her and she picked up on it. So that caused a few kind of, I don't know, difficulties being a dad, and an impact of being a dad to a child with disability, and coming to terms with all of that obviously had an effect on our marriage, because I had to be the main caregiver. I was the one going to the appointments, I was the one making decisions if decisions had to be made, and although he supported me, he was very much behind me in all of this, rather than side by side. But that isn't how it is forever. Certainly for us, it changed over time. I think I look back and I can see it, and perhaps when I went through it, I didn't notice. But we had less time together. Family life was obviously going to be a split and divide with a child with so much need. We couldn't do the same things with our children because some were able to do certain things and it wasn't appropriate for Nicola to go. So it was divide and conquer and meet their needs in different ways, which meant as a family unit we spent less time together. But we did do some things together. We ate together, we went on holiday together, but very often a lot of activities were separate. So that's quite wearing on a marriage. Having time together was seldom, it still is seldom, but as the children grow up, we can see that there's going to be kind of more married time together than perhaps there has been as they've grown up together. Nicola and Steve's relationship now is superb. So I say time heals. He became more confident as I went to do other things. I actually did a teaching degree when she was just into high school age. He stepped up and probably I had to step back, and that's how that changed. And now she is very much Daddy's little girl and accepts him. I have a strong Christian faith. I was brought up in a Christian household. I believe for myself from 16 and married in a church, married a minister obviously. Complete realisation that God existed. But my faith has changed and has strengthened actually from having had Nicola. I now see the reality of what I believe and how it pans out in a life that is, deemed to be more challenging. I remember in the early days when we knew that Nicola had this disability, we were grappling with little sleep and worries really in our head. I did feel very isolated. I've met many disabled people through the various appointments I'd had. Never seen anyone quite like my daughter with exactly the same need, and you do feel like you're on your own because everybody's disability is slightly different, everybody's personality is very different, how you react to news that you're told or diagnoses or appointments or the life that you lead. It's just different, and you can feel very much on your own in your little different world with your very different family. But my belief in God and my strength really has come from him, that in everything I do, that he is there looking out for me, and in the real depths of life is terrible, that God is there and protecting and supporting and being with me in it. The only organisation I knew that worked with families was Care for the Family, so I sent an email off about 7 or 8 years ago to Care for the Family and said, is there anything I can do? And then I was invited to come along to a weekend to find other mums in the same perspective, and talked about befriending other families who find life tricky, and the additional needs support line is amazing. It gives someone a chance to phone somebody in a similar boat who has been through similar circumstances, and a listening ear of someone who's been there, who's done that, who understands implicitly, even if the circumstances are different, we understand the feelings that underlie what each person's going through. I can remember thinking, how do other people cope if they haven't got a network of people who will listen, support, understand? And there are many, many people out there who do not have that. The Care for the Family Additional Needs Helpline, I think, does that for an awful lot of people. I think I've been a befriender now for about 7 years, give or take. I've had many mums ring up at the point where they think they desperately do need someone to talk to, either about specific needs of their child, which are linked very closely to my own experience of a disability, or the emotions are the same and they just offload. I think the marriage side of things is key. It's hard to talk to a husband about something that's worrying you when you don't want to lay another burden on them, but to talk to someone who you don't know, to talk to someone who's been there, done that, is a release. I would really encourage anybody who perhaps has a child, young adult with learning difficulties, with disability, with any need really, if they are feeling alone or confused or just need someone to listen to them who understands what they've been through, to get in contact with Care for the Family. You know, we're there to phone as often as need be. We're there to support and you know, just listen to the needs of the person who's going through it. Mums and dads need help. There are people out there who struggle. There are people out there who you know have gone through it, and there is life at the end of the tunnel. You know, it does get better.